You need to learn. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And because there was so much evidence in my life, I'm now focusing on fake news and fake science. And actually, it's far more interesting. So, because one speaker is missing, I added a few things. So the next half an hour will be quite depressing, speaking about all these challenges and no solutions. So I hope you're strong enough to bear that. But I think because there's a gala dinner tonight, so there's no problem. You can't. It's balancing. Okay, so first of all, conflicts of interest. I was till 5 weeks ago 50% the director of the Cochrane Journal Foundation. So that's a new foundation, and the Institute for Evidence in Medicine. This exists since the beginning of this year, and this is the first time ever. And so it was pretty hard to get that, but now this is sustainable funding together of 1.5 million per year, which is probably currently, even on an international level, pretty good, and it's much better than it was the last 20 years. So it's just time for me to go. And you see here also some strong intellectual conflict of interest. They are really important because the commitment to these terms here over 20 years makes you a bit blind for alternatives, I think. So I'm quite happy that I can speak about fake news. I go through the architecture of the international knowledge world, I would say, and go over unnecessary trials and systematic reviews, then the growing problem with the publication process, soft science now introduced with real-world data and especially big data and artificial intelligence. And also the language. The language is very often forgotten as a major barrier and problem. Of course, I leave you with the slides, so that's no problem at all. Why are we doing all this? This guy is called Neumann. He's quite famous now. And all we try to do is to get the best decision support for his diagnosis and therapy. And the way to do that is probably in a naive way to just look where it is. And this is what is currently more or less moving backwards to that concept to just look globally where you find this information. I'll come back to that later. But over the last 80, 90 years, a system has been established to collect this information in trials where one treatment with the other or one procedure with the other is compared. So that's the basic principle. And in technical terms, that's called counterfactual thinking. So what the philosophy behind that is, what would happen if I did the alternative? And if you then, again, try to look at it in simple ways, you see that there are mainly two factors which are disturbing this process. One is you do systematic errors, so that's the risk of bias. This has to be minimized. This can be never zero for principal reasons. And the other one is what in the English language is so easily called play of chance. So random errors. And that's a bit easier because you just need big groups to get rid of that. But also, again, it's not completely radical. And the gold standard, and that's one reason why very often these discussions go into the wrong direction, is usually it's very soon a battle between RCT and real-world data, observational data. But the principle behind that, if people would start from first principles, then they would start with these ideas and then get to the best method and not start with RCTs or the best method. The big picture is you have two worlds, evidence production and evidence implementation, we would call it today. We know absolutely for sure that we have incredible progress here, but this question mark can be drawn much, much bigger. In the US, it's still called this penetration process here, Brownian motion. So we have a lot of progress there, but we don't really know where. And if we don't really know how it works, then we can't influence it. Unfortunately, what we know very well is that of what happens up here, 50% is never arriving here. And this is one of the miracles in this methodological work. The first study who showed that was in 1986 in Sydney. And it looks like a natural constant. It's there. And any effort to get rid of that is not working. Even the last 10 years. Now it's a law in the US. It's a bit better, but it's never close to zero. And the history, again, and this nice day that Holger started here, 1968. So evidence-based started not in the UK. Most people connect that to the UK, but this started here. We saw on the map where it started. And one reason why this is very often connected to the UK is that Dave Sackett moved to Oxford in 1994. We've got a professorate there. That's how it looks as coming only from the UK. And we were, as always, many, many years later. And now, again, a few years later, I'm very glad to be here to launch this evening. If we think about the channel from patients to patients, most people think about literature here. But this is getting weaker and weaker. I will show you why in a few minutes. Then we have another channel that's called individual patient data analysis. This is much, much more effort. The most famous example here is tamoxifen after breast cancer, for example. And we know so much about tamoxifen because this has been analyzed over the last 30 years, really going back to the original data. And the last development is going to the data from authorities. This only works, of course, for drugs. But here it's more and more possible to get the original data from authorities or go to reports from authorities. And here the most famous example is the Cochrane review for Tamiflu a few years ago, which completely ignored the literature. And that's also part of the conflict, the current conflict. Within Cochrane, can we trust literature anymore? And the big question is just, what is trustworthy? And above all, you see, it's also a buzzword currently, translation. And the dream is, with big data, start here, especially in oncology, and don't need this here, get from here directly to the patient. You will see that later. Today, we speak only about this here, so the letter and here. And if we speak about trials, then we have to look at trials. And I show you one graph, which is RCTs, randomized controlled trials, easy to find in Medline. What you see here is an increase per year of approximately 30,000. And this looks like as if WHO controlled the whole process because it's such a smooth curve. It's not. It's just statistics. Yeah. So there's an increase of demand, of funding, and this makes it grow, as you see here. The truth, unfortunately or fortunately, is very much different. It's this. I told you that 50% is disappearing. That means even far more is started to do the research, and of course, this is the overall number actually. Currently, approximately, now it's almost 500,000 in Medline. And this would not be a problem if this would be random. But of course it's not. Here is everything you don't like. And here, the record figure I know, repetition of publication of one trial is 81. So the whole thing really is biased in a sense most people are not aware of. But you, as systematic reviewer, of course, you should at least know that there is a danger waiting for you. And of course, the damage is enormously. It's a huge waste in terms of human resources and money. It's cheating patients who participate because they believe that the knowledge they contribute is passed to the next generation of patients. And it really creates a heavily distorted, biased knowledge base. And most people ignore that. This is from all trials. Withholding results costs lives. Yeah? It's a killer. It's not a scientific misbehavior. It's very, very serious. And this is the same in your area as in others. And we have seen that this morning. The architecture is, you have HTA, guidelines to the bedside, or GPs. A bit weaker is patient information. And so this is, for example, for coverage by health insurances. These have to be harmonized, otherwise the system doesn't work. And systematic reviews are the key tool to get fall into this area here of this chaos of studies and trials, and to get it here so that guidelines group can work with it. And unfortunately, we will see in a few minutes that also this is not working as it should. Unnecessary trials and systematic reviews. Only one graph. This is from the Lancet. So aproctenine has been taken from the market because of side effects. And what you see, and that's very typical, but this is extreme. This starts from 87 till 2002, answering the same question with trials. This is 69 trials, and the argument here, and there are other papers in the New England Journal of Medicine, for example, is here where the confidence interval of this accumulated display here, when the confidence interval is not hitting the neutral line, then you should stop here. That's mathematically and statistically wrong, because you repeat the same thing again and again. So you have to correct the alpha, that's wrong. But very clearly, for common sense, somewhere here you should stop. And if you should stop here, that means that the rest from here to here is unethical, because unnecessary trials are unethical. And nobody cares, and nobody thinks about that. And even if people would think about it, they couldn't do it because the logistics is not there. And most people even don't know that in ethics boards. But that's the current practice. And if this problem would be solved, the resources set free from here would solve many, many problems. Because the shortage of money wouldn't disappear, of course, but it would change the world. And this is normal. And also, this is an incredible paper. If you look at any time point here, how many studies have been for the planning considered for this point here? It looks like we're losing your memory at any point of the whole society. They go back maybe, I think the median here is 7 trials, which happened earlier, and all the rest here is completely lost. It's another kind of disaster, and this is known for, you see, for 5 to 10 years now, and it's not changing really. So, and if you now apply that to systematic reviews, knowledge accumulation, what you see here is, this is the growth of trials. And if you now look at the growth of systematic reviews, again in Medline, what you see here is immediately, without looking at numbers, is that here you have an acceleration which you didn't see here. This means people start to doing more and more reviews on the same questions and try to manipulate the whole thing by selecting different trials, of course. It's another drama. Have you ever seen that before? Probably not. Good for you. To allow you to sleep. And this is dramatic. So, for example, a few years ago here, the increase was only almost half of what we have now. So this is 16,000 per year, new systematic reviews. What you also see here, if you consider also all industry reviews, then this is down to 10% now currently. So Cochrane is really not anymore a major player, which makes quality, the term quality, even more important. And if you want to read that, that's a fantastic paper. This journal is not known to many, Milbank Quarterly. John Ioannidis wrote this article on the mass production of redundant, misleading, and conflicted systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And if you look at the main factors driving that, and that's part of the whole story, it's always wrong incentives. So the pressure to publish is increasing, the whole mess I showed you. And the agendas are not driven by patients, as they should be, but by scientists and scientists' careers, and by journals. And that's the next story I tell you. So this is, I just show you these examples. So for example, the problem of duplicate systematic reviews. Open access and data sharing is in principle something we really need. But it has immediately got abused, and I show you what happened here. The name, if you try to find that, is, you have to look on the internet, is Biel. He is or was a librarian from a midtown in the Middle West in the US. And what you see here, I called it, in old times, the poor couldn't read, and currently the poor can't write. The shift, who has to pay from the old world to the new open access world, is that authors have to pay. And the cost for one article usually is between minimum 1,500 euros up to, if you have something in biology with a lot of graphs, $5,000 for one article. And what you see here is, of course, this is immediately abused. These so-called predatory publishers or journals have increased from 2011, very small number, to more than 1,000 currently. And you all know these emails where you're invited to publish something, to submit it to them, to show your expertise, or to travel to Tokyo to speak at a World Congress. And of course, this is just what happens. Author fees are business model for new journals. They pop up like grass, and because it's so easy to collect the money. And this is how the money flows. So the center is India. So the biggest company is called Omics, with more than 900 of these journals. Nigeria is also very strong, and now recently Turkey appeared here, and the bank accounts are in the US. And I didn't invent that, you see, that's the journal Science, yeah? It's on a high level published. This is in Nature, ban predators from the scientific record. And what now happened, and this is, most people thought so far, this is only happening in the low-income countries until this summer. And then we have a very strong group who works as investigative journalists. And what they did here, they systematically searched these journals for journals publishing there. And the result was 5,000. And that's far more than everybody expected. I also mentioned here the World Congress for example, for urology. So these promotions for big congresses, if you go there, then you will see that there are not more than 20 persons. And it's one person giving you the certificate, that's all. They cash for that. And the sad thing is, and that's what makes life so difficult, is that our established research system is simply ignoring what is happening there. So this is the joint statement in Germany of the leading big associations for research. You may have heard the name Helmholtz or Fraunhofer or Humboldt. So this is a charity, for example. And what they do here is they complain that they have been deceived, that science has been damaged and trust in it. Politics should keep out. So self-repair is absolutely sufficient. And they emphasize, of course, that even in those journals there may be good quality articles. If you look close at it, then you see that they didn't care at all. There was not a single statement before July 2018. And then they start mobbing you if you criticize that. So if you call it fake science in there, then they tell you that you ignore the real problem in science. And then there's one article, for example, Storm in a Teacup. You find these articles in the internet. And if you look at my presentations, so I don't want to promote myself, but I started and have them in any publication since 2015. And it was known, Biel started his business 2008. And you are all in danger if you publish something that you mistakenly go to one of these journals. So it's not easy to recognize them, because the outfit looks perfectly well. And if you are, for example, reviewing a research proposal, you are in a real problem, because in principle, if somebody presents 20 of his publications, in principle you have to go through all these publications and check whether the journal is okay or not. Because on the surface it looks perfectly well. And I can't repeat that often enough. The incentives in the established normal system are wrong. And you see here's another headline: incentives for scientists lead to underpowered studies with erroneous conclusions, and so on and so on. I could show you dozens of them. And this is a top example. This is Richard Horton. And he regrets that I read it, I think, because it's important. Medical and scientific publishers have lost their moral voice Do they have the courage to reclaim it? There's still sign of it as yet. So this is taken from Twitter. And the other one is today's medical scientific publishing industry operates in a moral vacuum. That's pretty deep, I think. It has betrayed its Enlightenment values. Time to remoralize. So Richard likes strong words. The problem is that he is the boss of a journal which is part of the system. And they had an enormous problem in Germany. They cancelled all contract because Germany tried to move to this new open access world. And then they had an open war between high-level committees and Elsevier. Really a dirty open war. And it's still not solved. And Lancet is part of it. So, for example, the famous University of Göttingen, the first half year, they didn't have single access to the Lancet, for example. Okay, language is simple. It's a fairly simple problem. Yeah, I showed you this red line, and only if people discuss that, the methodology, it's all happening up here. But in principle, if you speak about implementation, you are here. So there's another really strong barrier. And the amazing thing is, most people get that wrong. There's a little bit of in green. So the green part is I think it's 6%, is the genuinely English-speaking world. And the rest is blocked. So it's almost everything. But the money and the quality and the journals are here. And that's why, for example, Cochrane started to translate the language summaries to have at least a little bit. To give people who have to employ it, or patients, for example, at least giving them an idea what they can find in English. And this is one of the big failures of Cochrane. Yeah, so see this, we have done here quite a bit, but it's now 7,000 systematic reviews which are ready. And this is seriously underfunded. I was fairly close to 100% 15 years ago. Unfortunately, now I can say that I'm retired. The money came from Pfizer. So if we would do it with industry money, and that's madness, then we would more or less have it easily. But if you try to get that from public funding, then you're almost lost. And this is something you will have to struggle here in this country too. No, not you, but Miroslav. Okay. A lot of progress, and this is something which is really positive to see here, TRIP, turning research into practice. So this is, I would say, Google for medicine. And you see here, you can click on languages, and then you get the search results, at least the titles, in local languages. And I discovered when I did that a little bit earlier that Chestina is here. Is that Czech? Yeah. So I don't know. You are by far the smallest country in this list. I don't know how you got in there. Did you pay them? Okay. Brief word to observational studies, because there's a permanent pressure on this puristic world from people who think that experiments are not necessary. And I only show 2 slides. One is that the risk of bias assessment tool for observational study is there, and it exists, and is completely ignored. Most people who demand that we should only work with real-world data don't even know that this exists. Yeah, you see this here. And now I come to the big new competitor, big data, artificial intelligence, and personalized medicine, also very briefly. The whole thing was started with this book. Does anybody of you know this book? It has been, good. Did I recommend it to you? Yeah, okay. Thank you for following my recommendations. This book has been translated into 20 languages in the meantime, I think, and it's probably the best book as an example where the authors show that they don't understand their own contents. So this is a German in Oxford with a professorship. He's a lawyer, and this is a journalist. And they created all this hype, which you see here in a short summary. Big data can, without any methods description, analyze unstructured data, any kind of. Can easily solve every problem by using more data. But of course, then you need ownership of the data by the scientist or whoever does that, Google, for example. And then now that's getting very simple, and you cannot reproduce results because everything is changing so fast that you never get back to the past. And that makes life very easy because substantial part of the crisis of science is the reproducibility crisis. There's so much challenge where you have the results, and if you try to confirm them, you fail. They got rid of this problem because they have enough data. Okay, and the last one is, and that's the worst one, the era of causality, I call it, is over. We now have the era of correlation, because if you have enough data, correlation becomes causality. And we've been teaching every medical student, at least I did, many, many years, that this is absolutely wrong. And it is. And the reason where the whole thing started was 2007. So the Wired magazine is not bad. They are very good for provocative articles. And they here started with this really famous article by Chris Anderson, The End of Theory, the data deluge makes the scientific method obsolete. So they just switched off science in this context. And it worked, obviously, as I will show you in a minute. Yeah. And these are the results. For example, it's an absolutely stupid book, and it's painful to read it, but you have to read it to understand it. This is the end of randomness. Big data makes us and our life predictable. If this would work, the social and political impact of that would be a disaster, of course. Okay. Because in principle, you would know that you die tomorrow because you crash against a tree. So that's, of course, nonsense. But the content is just terrible. And coming back now, why this is affecting us and you here, if you go back to this picture, there's only 3 columns now, then you see that what happens now is the whole world is not working prospectively, but retrospectively. And if you then look at all these terms you see now in newspapers, for example, then you have data drilling, knowledge systems, artificial intelligence, and the biggest one is now deep learning or machine learning. Dr. Watson is always in the media, big data, of course. Examples for success are almost non-existing. Most are just examples, so there are no systematic investigations. And the best example to show that things may go completely wrong is this Stud article on Dr. Watson. This has been shown that it's absolutely wrong, and they kicked it out from here, Houston, it's MD Anderson, after the hospital. That's the most famous, or one of the most famous cancer hospitals in the world. After they invested $62 million into this, they completely kicked him or her out of the hospital. So that's the biggest example of failure. And what you see here again is always the promise that if you have more data, you will avoid, in this case, any wrong diagnosis and treatment. This is from this text, for example. So if you want to read a little bit about that, I wrote that in 2015. Simple, it's on the web, Lab Times, easy to find. New science, I called it ability. So I played with this word because the whole fundamental architecture of science is more or less attacked here in a very aggressive way. And in German, this is go in future, empty promises. Solutions? Who knows this? Look at that. Yeah. If the police is ringing the bell at your door, don't let them in. Or switch the computer off before they get in. So this is a server in Russia where you have access to 85% of articles from behind the paywall without paying. And I know many Cochrane people, especially in Germany, when Elsevier was not accessible, they had to use it. And they asked me whether I would allow that. I said, oh, I didn't hear your question. Yeah, but it's a nightmare. And this is a solution in 2018 for our information world. And, okay, to show you a good example, Equator is one really necessary quality assurance tool. And this happened this morning. that the German version of Equator now is live on the internet. So there are, I could go on now, rattle on for hours. Coming back to the principal difference, and then I stop. If you look at the orthodox world of science, and you have a long list, I don't go through them, you find them on all web pages of faculties, for example, good scientific practice, prospective based on protocol, and so on and so on. But we also discuss the crisis of science. If you now go into the new world, everything is unplanned, unintended, it simply works if you use the headline artificial intelligence. And what you then see is that the terms quality, uncertainty, and clinical outcome more or less have completely disappeared. You simply don't find quality. Quality is there because you have enough data. And for example, if you look at clinical outcome, more and more it's replaced, that's a new generation of surrogates from informatics. So if you improve the informatics quality of what you do, then more or less it implies that medicine gets better. But that again is nonsense. Yeah? But the pressure from, and behind that is Google, of course, and Amazon, the pressure to believe that the world gets better if you follow these recommendations is enormously. And I summarized it here. The old model is you have incremental progress, and you all know how hard that is, research in context. And now here, and that's very similar in many contexts to the language of Trump. The new model is disruptive. So for example, switching off theory is disruptive. We don't need the past. And okay, that's a real new model in science, but nobody has shown so far that that's better than the old one. And I summarize that and people don't like that very much. In this suit, Holger started this morning with a bias and then with this level to move experts from here up. This is a symbolic level of evidence table. You see here experimental studies, observational studies, and instead of experts, you now have big data and artificial intelligence here. So that's the current state if you look at the quality of methodology. In summary, clearly, medicine has enormous progress, and we have enormous progress in methodology. And this pair here from global, this is called knowledge translation from global knowledge to local implementation. It's just there. The last 20 years have generated mirrors, I think. And systematic reviews, of course, they are the key technology in here. And I really would like to leave this message behind, because evidence is threatened by what we see now, and most people are not really aware of that. So we see an enormous erosion, and I call it here damage of key concepts in the current development, and a serious confrontation with the old quality world of evidence-based medicine, or, for example, clinical epidemiology. And I think the objectives for the next years have to be return to quality or keep it, and quality assessment. And that's the strength of evidence-based medicine. And I think we should be, first of all, be more proud of it, and second, emphasize it more. Currently, it's going into the wrong direction. And one project, for example, where we could link your activities, and for example, Cochrane, is this book, Testing Treatments, which has now been translated into, I think, 16 languages, which is on the web, which is a very simple book, text, with principles for patients. So that's written by, the first one is a journalist. She's a breast cancer patient. Ian Chalmers founded Cochrane, and Paul Blasio is the president of the Global Evidence-Based Medicine Network. Okay, and now is my last slide. Now is my nicest slide. I'm very happy to be here, and congratulations that you, after some years of discussion, arrived at this point. And I'm really looking forward tonight, and I think you deserve applause.
Thanks, Gerd. That was a very comprehensive overview of a number of issues that relate to research waste and publishing and so on. So we'll see if there are any questions from the audience. Gerd,
they're depressed.
No, I don't think it's. This is some. There's nothing good about depression, but I think this is just making people think. So let me maybe ask a question of clarification. So publishers have huge conflicts of interest as well, right? So, and maybe that's what you're alluding to. But what's the solution to the fact that publishers need to produce sensational articles for a number of reasons, but one being that it increases their income and it makes the editors look better. So what's the solution? What's the solution to that? Because in part that is related to the explosion of systematic reviews, because systematic reviews, largely, by and large, are the more cited type of articles. But there are lots of other reasons. So what are we going to do about that? Do you have any suggestions or ideas?
Yeah,
Richard Horton's comment was...
Cochrane is... So we have to come back. Cochrane was proud of quality. And also emphasizing that has more or less disappeared, for example. I think if you want to fight those articles, you will fail. I think you have to know where you can rely on things, and have more or less a safe area where you have not to be aware that there are foul apples in it.
Do you so many authors? So there's a couple of follow-up questions. One is we are seeing a large number of systematic reviews being published outside of Cochrane, and you have your own journal for the JBI community. But we see a lot of articles published outside of that. Do you think Cochrane has taken any wrong steps that actually has happened? So I'm thinking of two things. One is the increasing difficulty with publishing your systematic reviews in more than the Cochrane library. In other words, dual publication. It's still possible, but it's very hard these days with Cochrane systematic reviews. And is it the production process, not so much the quality, that has made people move away from publishing in the Cochrane library to the other journals?
Well, it's both. The timing of the process in Cochrane is not anymore acceptable. So Cochrane reviews may need 1 to 2 years. And there are steps and times where you don't get a response from Cochrane review groups. This may be 6 months, even if you continue to write to them. So that's one reason. The other thing is they're all in competition. So, for example, if you have a hot issue and want to publish it, you will lose the race if you go for Cochrane. So we very often ourselves did not go for the Cochrane library, because we wanted to win the race, and we did in the end. So that's a really heavy argument against that. There's no simple solution, but most people are not even aware of what's happening in the background. It's known. Everything what I told is known, but it's not common knowledge. And I think that's something we really have to do. And what happened in Germany, for example, with the first time ever, it's called the Conference of Rectors of Universities. And what they now try to do, for example, you may know for PLOS, your university may have a contract that if you write something for PLOS, not your department has to pay these $1,500 for the article, but the university has a flat rate contract. So you can write it, and then these dangers are not so strong. So then you write it, and the process is BMC and PLOS is then peer review and so on and so on. And they now try to do that with Elsevier for the whole country. So this will be a contract on the level of, I think, billions, probably. So that everybody in the country can write an article, submit it to an Elsevier journal, and then it's printed without extra costs, and then it's open access. So that would be the solution. And I know the details. It's extremely difficult and tricky. But if that works, then a lot of stuff is then gone, because there's no attraction to make money in a single place. Yeah, but I'm not too optimistic that this will happen in the next 5 years.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yes. Other people, young research in particular?
Yeah.
Based on your experience and your opinion, what is the level of understanding and the danger of predatory journals and what they really are among young researchers and less experienced ones? Do they really know what's it all about, what they are?
No, they don't know it. And one thing which has to be changed urgently is the education of students, nursing, medical students. Research is not really, they are not educated with these things. So they're absolutely taken by surprise. And one of the failures is that the supervisors fail. So for example, in a normal hospital, the boss is always the last author. And then a young author who really stumbles into this mess and ruins his own career if he's unlucky. But the failure is not him, it's the supervisor. And I could list a long, well, it's failures. Funders are failing, for example. And now, for example, even the Indian government made a very clear statement, this was all over the place in the press, to universities that they have to guarantee that their own researchers are not publishing in these journals. And in the US, for example, it's called the Federal Trade Commission. They are now suing the Indian company on the level of $15 million. So they try to kill them with money. And it may work. They're pretty far. So this is now more or less moving to climate. So it's not a tiny little problem. And what you see then in Germany, that people downplay the problem, that's part of this disaster, that the established system is not doing what they are supposed to do. Yeah.
So So what can let him ask the question?
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for your excellent presentation and perfect ending. Well, thank you. Every time I'm hearing you, I'm learning something new, which is excellent. Thanks for this. And with the predatory journals, that's the comment for it. Quite recently, one of the PhD students came to me and said, "Well, finally, I published my first work in an impact factor journal." Yeah, I could look at it. It was told ID of the journal named Yoku. Yeah. Which actually, because it was 2 weeks, so I figured it out quite soon. So I think it's under us supervisors, the centers, to actually spreading knowledge about this and to learn people how to be able to track and to distinguish and see the predatory journals. So that's about it's on us, I think, on the supervisors of our PhD students and all who do the science.
Yes, and I think all of us and all of you just write simple articles, editorials in your journals, for example, just to disseminate the knowledge, because most people don't do that, and every single editorial is helpful for that. Yeah. And try to get it into teaching, of course.
We have one more question there.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to ask you also regarding the predatory journals. Could you please recommend us the valid and reliable the list of predatory journals? Because at the moment it's a very modern topic. I completely agree, but I also meet with the fact that sometimes people accuse a journal to be predatory. And indeed, because we don't have like international approved criteria, we know the criteria, but we don't have the valid method to confirm which journal is valid or predatory or not. So I would like to ask you if you could recommend, because also the very famous Jeffrey, the blogger, his blogger was shut down, and he was accused to be that he took some money from journals. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, many people is interpreting his list, but indeed this list was accused that it's not valid and reliable as well.
Yeah, it was a very dirty story behind what I showed you. So he was mobbed, more or less out of the job, even by his own university. But the list is continued by somebody anonymously. Yeah, but the disadvantage is that's a negative list. But there's a positive list. It's called DOAJ. If you go there, and I think we need publicly funded positive lists So similar to Medline, yeah, and those journals which are accepted as with integrity and all these usual arguments, they have to be on that list. And then the first step by the scientists should be go to that list and check whether the journal is there positively. And that would work. It costs some money, of course. But I think WHO in medicine, for example, could be a natural place, or, well, UNESCO on that level. Because the damage is enormous.